let's all sing together. So it's like a moment of hope, as we all should hope for peace and good times. אני מביט מהחלום, וזה עושה לי די עצוב. האביב חלף עבר לו, מי יודע אם ישוב. הליצן היה למלך, הנביא נהיה ליצן, ושכחתי את הדרך, אבל אני עוד כאן, ויהיה טוב, יהיה טוב, כן. לפעמים אני נשבע, אז הלילה, לובשים כנפיים ועפים אל הצבא, ואחרי שנתיים הם חוזרים ללא תשובה. אנשים חיים במתח, מחפשים סיבה לנשום, ובין שנאה ורצח מדברים על השלום. כן, שם למעלה בשמיים עננים לומדים לעוף, ואני מביט למעלה ורואה מטוס חטוף, ממשלה של גנרלים מחלקת את הטוב, ושלהם אלה שלנו, מתי נראה את הסוף? נשיא מצרים, איך שמחתי לקראתו, פירמידות בעיניים ושלום בנקטתו, ואמר היי בוא נשלים ונחיה כמו אחים, ואז הוא אמר קדימה רק תצאו מהשטחים. אז הלילה, אותך אני אשאל. As we're going over this song this morning, I was thinking, okay, so which verse should I conclude this show and this song with? And since those years have gone by, 35, there's about 25, almost 30 verses to choose from.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar as we're coming together as a movement to mark Israel at 75 years. I'm Libby Linkinski from New Israel Fund. I'm opening this program with my dear colleague and friend, Deborah Shushan of J Street. We just saw David Broza performing the iconic song Yeh Tov by Yonatan Geffen of blessed memory, who just passed in these last days. This is an important moment for us to come together as Progressive Israel and our community. And so Deborah and I are very pleased to welcome you.
Thanks so much, Libby. I don't know about you, but after Yeh Tov, I'm starting this off a little bit verklempt already. That was so beautiful. I'm Deborah Shushan of J Street. Welcome to everyone. I want to say just a couple words about the Progressive Israel Network. It brings together 12 organizations representing Americans who are committed to pursuing democracy, equality, and peace in Israel. The coalition provides a strong, unified voice in support of its members' common goals: democracy and equal rights, religious freedom and pluralism, and a two-state solution that would secure a peaceful future for Israel and an end to military occupation. PIN's proud member organizations are Aleph, Amenu, Americans for Peace Now, Habonim Dror, Hashomer Hatzair, Jewish Labor Committee, J Street, New Israel Fund, New York Jewish Agenda, Partners for Progressive Israel, Reconstructing Judaism, and Trua, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights.
It's a pretty great group. Thanks, Deborah. And today's program we're very honored that it's being hosted by two fantastic hosts who we all love and read and listen to. And so it's an honor to introduce you to Rabbi Amichai Lau-Levi and to Noah Landau. Rabbi Amichai is the founding spiritual leader of Lab Shul New York City and the creator of Storytelling Inc. An Israeli-born Jewish educator, writer, and activist, he received his rabbinical ordination from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in 2016. Rabbi Amichai is a founding member of the Jewish Emergent Network, serves on the Leadership Council of the New York Jewish Agenda, is a member of the Global Justice Fellowship for the American Jewish World Service, the Advisory Council for the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, an advisor to the Sulh Peace Project between Palestinians and Israelis, the Jerusalem LGBTQ Open House, and is a founding faculty member of the Reboot Network. These days, he's deeply engaged with the ongoing protest movement to save Israeli democracy. He's also my rabbi and friend. Noah Landau is an Israeli journalist. She's the deputy editor-in-chief of Haaretz, Israel's oldest daily. Noah has worked at Haaretz since 2009 as a reporter, commentator, and news editor. She served as Haaretz head of the news department and editor of Haaretz English edition, and is a member of the paper's editorial board. Noah is also the founder of Haaretz 21, an organizational project aimed at amplifying underrepresented voices and stories of Arab Palestinians in Israel. She is also an advisory board member and alum of the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at the University of Oxford, where she studied the rise of gag orders in Israel. Welcome, Amichai and Noah, and please go ahead and open up our program today.
Thank you so much, Libby. Hello, shalom everyone from Tel Aviv. Thank you for joining the Progressive Israel Network to mark Israel's 75th anniversary. It is no secret that this year's national days feel even more complex than the usual, with the judicial overhaul and fight for democracy, tearing even families apart. These days feel like quite a pivotal moment in Israel's history. The country's core values and identity, maybe for the next 75 years, could be determined today and tomorrow by politicians, but also by each and every one of us on the streets or supporting from afar. We have wonderful speakers today with us, and I really hope we'll be able to unpack some of those difficult questions about this political moment and also beyond. Amichai.
Shalom, Noah. Thank you, Libby, and all the friends at the Progressive Israel Network inviting us to be part of this conversation this afternoon. I'm at home in New York City, just returned from 10 days in Israel yesterday. So like many of you, we are here and there. And the opening song, Yeh Tov, is, like Deborah said, a real anthem of hope in the middle of these turbulent days. The word progressive means that there is progress, that there is evolution, that there is movement. The word Israel means the same thing. The original meaning of the word might have been to wrestle with God, with reality, with life. And so more than ever these days, this year, we are wrestling with what it means to be one with Israel, to be on the front lines of fighting for Israel's democracy and future. And on this day, as we enter the sacred days of Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut with so much wrestling. It really is a profound honor to be here with this panel of American leaders, Israeli leaders, and 400 of us who care enough to show up and be part of this conversation. Thank you all for inviting me and for being here today. I will start by introducing our first panel this afternoon. Starting off with a friend and teacher, New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, who was elected to serve as New York City's budget watchdog and chief accountability officer in November 2021. Brad's background in community organization and urban planning informs his work to make government work better for all New Yorkers. First elected to the City Council in 2009, Brad co-founded this council's Progressive Caucus and has a strong track record of partnering with community advocates to win transformative change for a more just and equitable city. Brad is a founding member of New York Jewish Agenda and regularly speaks on issues related to Israel-Palestine. With Brad as well is Rabbi Andrea London, a nationally recognized leader who has served Beth Emet, the Free Synagogue in Evanston, Illinois, since 2000. She has worked to forge interfaith relationship in Evanston and throughout the Chicago area. For many years, she was the co-chair of the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs Jewish Muslim Community Building Initiative. She's also a leader in the Evanston Interfaith Clergy and Leaders Association and the Evanston Reparations Movement. She is the co-chair of J Street Rabbinic and Cantorial Cabinet, a member of T'ruah, and a board member for Partners for Progressive Israel. She has been an activist for Israel-Palestinian peace and justice for more than 35 years. And finally, Zach Harris, who was raised in Skokie, Illinois, and after high school has spent a gap year in Israel at Mechinat Nachshon in Sderot before attending Brown University. Zach graduated in 2022 with a BA in political science. His senior thesis on the development and ramifications of the 2018 Israeli nation state law won the Alan S. Zuckerman Prize for Outstanding Political Science undergraduate thesis. While at Brown, Zach helped revitalize and grow his campus's J Street U chapter, and also intern at Americans for Peace Now and J Street New England Regional Office. Zach spent many summers as a chanich, as a camper, and later a madrich, a counselor at Habonim Dror Camp Tavo at Three Rivers, Michigan. And this year, he's participating in the NIF Social Justice Fellowship, specifically working at Standing Together, Omdim Beyachad, Nakaf Ma'an, a progressive social movement organizing Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel in pursuit of equality, peace, social, and climate justice. Thank you all for being here. And Noah, I'm going to hand it over to you to ask the first question.
Thank you, everyone. So the first question is maybe pretty basic. Why do you even care about Israel to begin with? What in our lives brought us to engage? And I'll be happy to hear each of you. Let's start maybe with New York City Controller, Brad Lander.
Shalom, Noah and Rabbi Amichai. Thank you so much. It's a blessing to be with everyone on this panel. Thank you to the Progressive Israel Network and New Israel Fund at J Street and T'ruah. And I'm looking forward, in addition to this observation of the 75th anniversary, next Shabbat, Omdim B'Yachad is going to be in Brooklyn, and we're looking forward to hearing from and being thoughtful and critical with and celebratory with them as well. The synagogue that I attend, Kolot Chayenu in Brooklyn, our mission statement is it's a place where doubt can be an act of faith, and all hands are needed to create our community. And really, so much for me, that's what it means to be Jewish, is to just wrestle critically with the traditions that bring us here. And that's true in my work in the United States. Boy, there are some things I love about Brooklyn and about the United States of America and its struggle for more justice, and brutal things in our history from the very beginning. And so many painful inequalities that we confront today. Of course, that's true in my own Judaism. Our oldest son is named Marek for Marek Edelman, who was one of the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. and a Bundist, a tradition that I find great inspiration in. But boy, you would not want to make the argument that inclusive social democracy fought for by Jews in Poland was something that won the outcomes we want in the world. So we wrestle critically with the things that inspire us, and we look honestly at them. And obviously, that is just absolutely has to be true about Israel as well. I find many moments of inspiration in the set of people who envisioned in the Declaration of Independence an ingathering of exiles, complete equality in social and political rights, freedom, justice, and peace in the tradition of the prophets. But we must look honestly at the Nakba, at expulsionist impulses and actions in the history. And of course, unfortunately, in the present day as well, as Peter Beinart reminded us in Currents yesterday, it is not only about naming historic wrongdoings, it is having our eyes open to present day ones. And that for me is what loving our traditions, what loving our Jewish traditions, and what observing Israel's 75th anniversary has to be about.
Thank you, Rabbi London.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here with all of you on this anniversary and to explore these questions together. My first experience in Israel was when I graduated from college, but my growing up was influenced by, I think, two primary things that happened in Israel. One was the peace accord with Egypt. And as David Broza was singing Yeh Tov, I was thinking about that, about Sadat coming and how important that was in my early years. And then in 1982 was when I was graduating high school and going off to college. And that was the beginning of the Lebanon War, the first war with Lebanon. And so sometimes people look at people my age and think, oh, we were just imbued with Israel being perfect and wonderful and the threats to Israel from the 67 war. And while I was alive in 67, I was too young to have it really be an influence in shaping me and how I understand Israel. And so I would call myself the in-between generation, the generation that really understands the importance of Israel and the importance of having a safe haven for Jews, and at the same time looks critically, as Comptroller Lander was talking about, at the things that have happened in Israel and continue to happen in Israel, and the possibility for peace that I really saw in my lifetime with the peace in Egypt. And so all of those things hold my relationship. I also believe strongly that the state of Israel, if it's really going to be the state for all Jewish people, that we all need to be engaged, that we are not sitting on the sidelines, that we're not cheerleaders, that we're actually in the game. And my first year in Israel, which I spent on a volunteer year, was very formative for me, not only in terms of taking these abstract ideas that I'd been raised with, but also putting Israel firmly in my heart, that learning the Hebrew language and getting to know Israelis and really understanding the history and the development of the country had such a profound emotional and spiritual impact on me, really led me to the rabbinate, and so much of my adult life and my commitments were made during that year, including wanting to be and beginning to be a peace activist after I had met Palestinians and to saw what their life was like. I returned from that first year a week before the first Intifada broke out. And when American Jews were saying to me, "What's going on? Why are they so upset?" I felt that I had an important responsibility to share the stories of the Palestinians I had met and that I had worked with, and to understand that we need to see the entire picture if we're going to create peace and justice and real safety for all Israelis, Jewish and Palestinian, and for Palestinians who live in the West Bank, that everyone, if they're going to have democracy and equality, that we need to look firmly at Israel straight in the eye and to say, as participants and as trying to create the Israel that is not just one in which we'll physically have a safe haven, but one in which we live up to the spiritual and the religious and the democratic values, then we have a role to play. And I've been engaged in that role in many, many years, because Israel is firmly, as I said, implanted in my heart and my spirit, and I feel like I have a responsibility and a duty and a great love to do the work that I do.
Thank you, Rabbi. Amen. Zach Harris.
Thank you, Noah. I think like many of us here, I grew up at the convergence of a few different ideologies. The American Jewish institutions that raised me taught me many different, often actually contradictory ways about how to care about Israel. I was told it's a religious command, Jewish safety, a love for Hebrew culture. These are all reasons I was taught to identify with Israel. And I struggled identifying, not identifying, identifying again with many of these concepts throughout my teenage years, which actually really wasn't so long ago. But as I've come to spend more time in this land, before college, now after college, these ideologies don't matter to me as much. I find that Israel as a state, to me, is just that. It's a country with its own successes and more, unfortunately, often than not, faults, but it's not an entity that I find I can truly care about in a deep emotional way. So when I engage with Israel, it's not because I care about the country, it's about I care about its people, because I want my nieces and nephews to inherit a truly equal democratic society. I want my Israeli friends to be able to afford an apartment and not worry about the ever-impending next war. I want my Palestinian friends, wherever they live, to be able to elect a government that respects their most basic rights. In only 2 months, I'm actually moving back to America, but I know so many people here who either can't or don't want to leave. So I don't really care about Israel, but I care about them, and I'm staying in this fight for them.
Thank you, Zach, Rabbi Andrea, and Brad, for sharing some of your thoughts about why you're here, why you care. And we want to follow up with the next question, which is like, from this moment at 75 years, as you've all said, there's much to look at the eye, like in the eye of where we've come from, where we are, including the lights and the shadows. And we want to ask you about what does it look like 75 years from now, specifically through the lens of the Israeli-American Jewish relationship. We know that if we hear, this is a relationship that has been forged over these many years and keeps evolving. And there's a real question of what would a morally healthy relationship be between American Jews and Israel moving forward so we can sustain these prophetic visions you've all shared. What might a vision of a healthy relationship look like? And Rabbi Andrea, we'd like to start with you.
Thank you, Rabbi Amichai. I think, first of all, there are two parts of the relationship. One is, what is the American Jewish relationship to Israelis, both Jews and Palestinians, and what is our relationship with the American government vis-a-vis Israel? And I think we have both responsibilities. That, number one, our relationship with Israel, I think, calls upon us to be in relationship with people who are on the ground and are working to create an equitable and democratic society, like Sally Abed, who we're going to hear from later, from Standing Together, is an organization that I support wholeheartedly, and so many other organizations that we, as progressive Jews, need to be engaged in those relationships, because if we step away because we're frustrated by what's happening in Israel, then the forces on the right, those who are contributing money to Elad and trying to settle the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Silwan with Jews and to displace Palestinians, that Jews who are trying to entrench the occupation, they are not leaving. Their money, their voice is what is going to be loud and is going to have an impact on what's happening in Israel. And so it's really important, number one, to say that we can't absent ourselves, that if we care deeply in the quality of life for everybody who will live in Israel and in the territories that Israel controls, then we need to step up and we need to say our voices need to be heard, and we need to be in relationship with the amazing people who are doing the work on the ground. Avi Dabush is also here from Rabbis for Human Rights. I mean, these are the people who are going to make a difference. And that's number one, is we need to be making sure that we're doing everything that we can to uplift their voices. Comptroller Lander, you talked about that Sally was going to be at your congregation. She was at my congregation last week. I was in Israel last month, and I was protesting with Standing Together in Kaplan, and part of the drum circle, and chanting the slogans. And I went with Standing Together out to Hawara after the horrific pogrom. I was there to stand together with Israelis who believe strongly that we need to create something different on the ground, and that we need to express our horror about what happened in our name. And many things I could say about that, but I won't continue on that track for now. I think the other thing that's important, and this is the reason that I've been very actively involved in J Street and co-chair of the J Street Rabbinic Cabinet, is that we have a profound impact to make on the American government. That right now we have right-wing forces within our own community and the evangelical Christian community that only want to see part of the picture, that don't want to understand the suffering of the Palestinians Palestinians and that somehow think that Jewish security can come at the cost of equality for everyone. It cannot. Jews cannot be secure if Palestinians are not secure. Jews cannot live in a democracy if Palestinians aren't given democratic rights. We cannot continue to oppress Palestinians and to steal their lands and to do all of the horrific things that are happening in the West Bank if we want to, as we sing so beautifully in the in Hatikva, Liot Am Choshi B'Artzeinu. We can't be a free people in our land if other people are oppressed, and we also can't know safety and security. And so, for those who try to say that we can only talk about what Israel needs in terms of security, and that security means armed security, that we are fooling ourselves to think that that is going to give us any kind of real security, and it's certainly not going to create the Israel that will be democratic and that will continue to thrive and to survive. And so we both need to be supporting organizations like J Street and all of the organizations of Progressive Israel Network that are trying to push the American government into really looking squarely at what's happening in Israel and to say that we need to help to change things that are on the ground because the Israelis and Palestinians won't be able to do it themselves. And we also need to be supporting the progressive organizations in Israel that are really making a difference.
Wow, Andrea, thank you for those important points and powerful reminders. Zach, as you are planning to come back to the States soon, and you're obviously a holder of both visions and maybe the younger one among us at this point, what do you see in the next years that will be a helpful, healthy, moral choice for American Jews in this conversation?
Thank you. I don't know if I can really imagine what 75 years later is going to look like, but I have a framework that might be useful for how we get there. And I'll get to it in a bit of a roundabout way. As was mentioned before, through the NIF Shatil Social Justice Fellowship, I've been spending this year working at Standing Together, which has been so wonderfully mentioned before. And what inspires me most about their work is our focus on shared interests. We don't organize people around abstract moral ideologies. We don't scold them about what we think is right or wrong. Rather, we try to unite diverse communities around their most basic interests, such as affordable housing, a livable climate, personal security. And perhaps most radically, we even extend this framework to the occupation. We believe that the vast majority of Israeli and Palestinian citizens of Israel, and I think it's quite obvious Palestinians living under occupation, have a shared interest in ending it. They'll all benefit from a safer country, a less bloated military budget, and a better international reputation. And it's only a small settler and military elite that really benefits from the occupation, and that's who we're directing our fight against. And I think over the next 75 years, and hopefully over the next year or two, we can apply the same framework to the US-Israel relationship. I think that America's de facto support for the occupation through its blank check military aid and practically unconditioned diplomatic support just doesn't benefit most Americans. I think it's obvious why Palestinian Americans don't benefit from it, but also Jewish Americans who are often finding themselves distanced from progressive struggles or communities torn apart by these debates aren't benefiting from the status quo. And I think all Americans have an interest that our international policy is promoting a world that fosters democracy and equality. And at least in the Middle East, I don't believe that our policy towards Israel is doing that, at least not effectively. I know that there are some who probably benefit from the occupation in America, far-right Jewish lobby, pro-Israel evangelicals, the military-industrial complex, but I don't want their interests to define the US relationship. I want our interests, our progressive interests, to define it.
Thank you, Zach. I hope you'll get it to 75 plus, but at least the next few years, this is a good framework. Thank you. And finally, Brad.
So I have to start with a little honesty here. I spent most of my career in public office, the first, let's say 10 of my 15 years with my lips, my mouth zipped too tight on the human rights and dignity and freedom of Palestinians. The incentives are just not strongly enough in place for politicians in the United States, including Jewish and progressive ones, to be loud about the occupation and to demand change. And I need to express some like gratitude to New Israel Fund and J Street for sponsoring the convening that introduced me to Omdim Biachad and Ayman Odeh and a set of people that helped me realize I was not doing anyone any favors by being quiet about the occupation. And so I have tried hard to be much louder in the last couple of years. And I was very proud a couple of weeks ago to sign on with many of you to the statements surrounding Congressman Jamal Bowman and Senator Bernie Sanders in their letter following exactly where Zach is going to say the United States cannot continue to write a $4 billion blank check to a right-wing authoritarian government that announces its commitment to the expulsion of Palestinians and the extension of an oppressive regime. And while we absolutely must speak up about the judiciary and about democracy within the Green Line, the American-Israeli relationship, especially at the governing level, if we are going to say the reason that we put foreign aid out into the world is about the extension of values and interests, the extension of democracy, then we have to put conditions on that. It has to be conditioned on human rights. So I was glad to support that letter, but we have much farther to go. That letter did not get that many signatories in either the House or the Senate. And I think all of us who believe, as has been said here, that the vision that we
Oops. Well, I think we may have lost Brad at a critical moment, but I believe we heard him loud and clear that it is on us to raise our voices loud and clear. And his admission of truth that being silenced inspires me to think as we wrap this part up, and I'll hand it over to Noah in a moment to introduce the next segment. Hearing Brad, Zach, and Rabbi Andrea, I'm hearing in my head the verse from Genesis, from the very beginning of our human story, when Cain kills Abel, and the Torah says, "Kol dmei achicha zoakim elai min ha'adama." The sound, the voice of your brother's blood is calling me from the earth, from the land. And so we're hearing the blood boiling of our siblings, and on us to hear that voice and voice speak up. Shomer achi anochi, we are our siblings' keepers. And that is so true for these days of Israel's reckoning and for Earth Day that's coming up this weekend as well. So with that, thank you, Rabbi Andrea, Zach, and Brad for getting us started on this perspective between American Jewry and Israel. And Noah, take it next.
Thank you. I'm sorry that Brad Lander was silenced while he was talking about being silenced. I think we heard some very honest, thoughtful, and critical answers, which highlight, I think, just how much this connection, complicated as it might be, is still very much alive 75 years later. In my Jewish family, Amichai, I was taught that if you care and love someone, you also sometimes have to tell them the truth when needed. And I think it's a part of that. And while we acknowledge and celebrate the significance of the establishment of the State of Israel and the complexities, we also know that for 20% of Israel's citizens, this is not a celebration. It is impossible, I think, to understand the relations between Jews and Palestinians in Israel today and hope and plan for a better future without knowing and learning about the Nakba as well. Zochot is an Israeli organization documenting the history of Palestinian communities before 48. They collect testimonies from the period. And the following video, which we're about to see, is a testimony by Khadija Safadi from Safed, Tzfat.
Wow, folks, apologies on behalf of the team here that the audio was not heard. I think in some ways it's so symbolic, as Noah was saying before, that Brad got silenced when he's talking about not needing to be silenced, and that this powerful testimony of this beautiful elder telling us the story of Safed and her family was like a silent movie. We get to watch, we get to hear it with a deeper ear. And I'm sure that the organizers will send out the links to this and other videos that will help us look this reality in the eye and open our hearts and our ears to these haunting stories that I myself, growing up in Israel, was not only not allowed to know about, they were completely silenced. So thank you to Zachot and for bringing this testimony. To bring us deeper into the heart even further, there is one more video of a song created by an ensemble of the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, together with top artists from all over the world, including David Rosa, who we met, Achinoam Nini, who's coming to protest here on Sunday, and many others from all over the world. And this is about home, really finding a home for all of us.
الشام يجيب اغراضه ويجي. انا كنت بحيفا لما صارت الحوادث، امي واخوتي قالوا لي تعالي. انا بدي اجي، سافروا على طريق الفينري رخبطه. خفت اروح.
This is Maria from my house in the old city.
This is home from Beit Halima, Jerusalem.
This is Achinoam Nini.
This is Mira Awad. I love you all.
مرحبا أنا محمد الأعور من الجوقة وبدي أغني لكم.
This is Joanna Jones from my home in Hollywood.
It's Rami coming to you live from the French show.
I'm excited to be connected with everyone across the globe.
This is Craig Jessup from my home in Providence, Utah.
I try to use my voice as a weapon of mass connection.
This is Kira Butcher, talking about Ramallah.
Hi, Alina Gash.
Hi, I'm Sam Shuri. I'm Casey Brevis. And I'm so happy that this song, Home, that I got to record with JYC, is bringing so many people together at this time.
Hi, it's Alice. Hello from my home in Rahavia.
Hold on to me as we go, as we roll down this unfamiliar road, and although this way treat us alone, just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
favorite choir.
You are a light of hope.
This is a moment where the world is reevaluating what home can be and what kind of responsibility we have.
The more love, the better for all of us.
We all are one in this world. Just the way it is.
حبيت أنا اليوم أهدي هاي الأغنية لكل واحد بالزوجة.
يا خزكي ونعبغة دخول بأخ.
I'm sending lots of love.
Stay safe, everyone. We're all in the same boat.
מקווה שכולם יעברו את התקופה הזאת בשלום. ביי.
Hey! Thank you so
So this was the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, and we now want to move on to the Israeli panel. With us today, Yonatan Levy. Yonatan Levy is a PhD student at the London School of Economics and a research fellow at the Berl Katzenelson Foundation and at Molad, the Center for Renewal of Israeli Democracy. His academic research focuses on two topics: the rise of right-wing populism in Israel and the generational politics of millennials in Israel and abroad. Before embarking on his doctoral studies, Yonatan worked also as a journalist, as a political researcher, and in 2011, he was one of the organizers of the Israeli social protest movement. Sally Abed, hi Sally, is a member of the national leadership at Standing Together, the largest Jewish Arab grassroots movement in Israel. In recent years, Sally has become a prominent Palestinian voice in Israel, advocating progressive causes for social and climate justice, and highlighting their connection to the struggle for peace and to the occupation through building a new majority in Israeli society. Sally is also the co-host of Groundwork, which is a podcast series about Palestinians and Jews refusing to accept the status quo and working to change it. Avi Davush, Avi, I see you, was born in Ashkelon to a religious right-wing Mizrahi family and attended Zionist religious schools and the Bnei Akiva youth movement. In his early 20s, he founded and headed a school for children with autism. Over the last 2 decades, Avi has been involved in and has led several social organizations and movements, including the Negev Council and the Movement of the Peripheries. And he was one of the organizers of the Equality March in 2016 and 2022. He is the Director General of Rabbis for Human Rights, author of the book, The Periphery Rebellion, and a regular op-ed contributor. Avi is also a rabbinical student, and he was awarded the New Israel Fund's UK Human Rights Prize in 2021. Hi, everyone. So, this moment of political shakeup is also comes together now with this big round anniversary. And I'll be happy to hear from you. What are we reconning with when we recon in Israel at 75 years? How do you see that moment in this country's history, specifically with this very difficult political moment? So we'll start with Sally, then Avi, then Yonatan.
Okay, hi, good evening, everyone. Well, good afternoon for most of the listeners. This is a very difficult position for me to be here. And I really asked myself, you know, I have nothing to celebrate. And and I asked myself, what do I have to celebrate? And I think it's mainly two things. It's one, that we are at a place where we can have a platform and a space that can talk about the Nakba during, in connotation and in relation to Independence Day. And the other thing is to realize the privilege that I have to have this kind of platforms and have the tools and the ability to tell my story that my grandparents definitely did not get to have, and my parents had to completely relinquish and give up in order to survive and provide for us. in Israel as Palestinians. And I guess what I'm celebrating is just the fact that I am able to be a voice, a Palestinian voice that at this point tries to navigate the complexity of also more than ever and more than my parents and my grandparents, I am part of Israeli society. And I think for me at this point, this whole moment where democracy is being on the main table of discussion, I think it is an opportunity for me with my Palestinian and Jewish partners to really reflect on not only defending a democracy as is, as the status quo, but reflect on the foundations, the democratic foundations or the lack of of this country, and not only for me as a Palestinian, but also to understand how do we envision a new majority, and in fact, the majority in Israeli society that has a conflict with the current government, but also with the historic foundations of Israel. And how can we take that opportunity when we talk about democracy to not defend it, but to redefine it for all of us? And how do we actually redefine the place that we live in and the majority that we live in, and really break that dichotomy and build a place where we deeply understand and deeply believe in our shared homeland, in our shared destiny as people, as a majority of people that live here. And I think that's what it means to me. And it's definitely the idea to come and speak in reflection of independence that reflects my pain is the kind of complexity that we are just now starting to look and navigate truly and deeply. And I think that's truly an amazing thing and an amazing start. And I think this period of time we'll look back at it and look at it and really think this is where it all started. This is where we really started imagining a new kind of reality, a new kind of us, and a new kind of society in Israel-Palestine. And that's what it means to me.
I love your optimism, Sally. I really hope that
I have to. I can't afford not being optimistic.
Avi?
Hello, good evening from Sderot, and Eid al-Fitr Saeed. This week, of course, I believe for many Israelis, and of course for Arabs in Israel, is a very intense week each year between the Holocaust Day and then the Memorial Day and Independence Day and Nakba and so on. And this year it's even more intense. And right now in the media, if you look on the media in Israel, people are talking about what will happen in the Memorial Day, and maybe feel that the basic themes, the basic theme that we know about reality, about our holidays, about our days, our national days, and so on, becoming much more in question. So this is a very interesting days to live, as the famous Kers said. And I consider myself a Zionist and also religious secular Jew. And I'm a rabbinical student, and of course in our work in Rabbis for Human Rights, we tend to think that the question about the Jewish values of this country is really crucial to our other, we'll talk about the other 75 or more years of Israel. And I see what I can see in those times, it's not only about, we used to talk about the democratic state and the Jewish state and the intense kind of struggle between those two values, but I see, or we are seeing in Rabbis for Human Rights, the struggle between Jewish values. And the question is, when we face Judaism, and of course, we talked about what happened in 48 and before and after and so on. It wasn't really nice, not for Arabs and not for Oriental Jews. My families came from Syria and Libya and so on. But right now, we can see the highest peak of the Jewish supremacy ideas, of course, Otzma Yehudit, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and so on. And the question is, I can see it even in what's happening in the street, which Jewish values will we take in this country, in this Jewish country? And this is really complex. Of course, as a minority, we are not used to have a country. It's only 75 years, and many years we were a minority that executed and burned and so on. So this is a crucial moment for us. And I can say that it's a time of fear, but it's not a time of despair, because I can say that my wife used to talk about leaving the country, kind of fantasies. I'm so rooted here, so I can't believe that I will do it. It was before and after the elections, but right now she feels hopeful. Of course, we all have great fears about this country, and it's not really evident that we can be sustainable, but we see so many miracles, and I can think about this time, maybe this moment in time, that we can say secretly that we are proud of it, because it's on the base of activists like Sally and Jonathan and others, on the base of civil society, that NIF have so many gained so many work in order to do this, to flourish this civil society. So I just wanted to say that in Be'er Sheva, that we are leading the struggles in the demonstration in Be'er Sheva. It's amazing. It's the biggest demonstrations ever in Be'er Sheva and in the Negev, in each and every issue. And we can see people that we didn't see before. We can see right-wing people, and of course, Jews and Arabs and others. And we are talking about the Equality Coalition. And this is really important to think about what is going on in the next day, in the next level, if, and it's a big if, we will succeed in stopping this crazy kind of act of the government. But I can be hopeful, worried, of course, but really hopeful.
Jonathan, how do you see Israel at 75 through the lens of this specific political moment?
So I think we're facing a double reckoning, if you will. On the one hand, the reckoning with the consequences of Israeli liberals retreating and withdrawing from public life and political life in the last few decades, the consequences of which are the rapid rise of the inequality coalition of the anti-democratic and the anti-liberal forces in Israel that have enjoyed this situation in which Israeli liberals, although they have a lot of resources, a lot of power, and are, exist in great numbers, are not as involved as they can be in Israeli political life. So we are facing the reckoning. We're facing the reckoning with the consequences of that retreat. And the kind of Israel that has been built under our noses, the sort of anti-liberal movement that people in this room have been warning against for, 15, 20 years now. Suddenly, all the masks are off, and it is so much easier to see who believes in what, and it forces everyone to take a side, which I think is an interesting moment for us all. So we are reckoning with, it's a moment of reckoning with the political danger and the anti-liberal coalition that we will have to beat in the short term and in the long term. But it's also reckoning with our own power, which I think is much, much greater than we sometimes estimate, because we tend to be depressive and politically melancholic and sort of wallow in our despair sometimes as lefties. But I think the situation nowadays proves beyond all doubt that liberals in Israel, broadly defined, are a very, very strong, capable, idealistic group of people. And that when it wants to exercise power and influence, it can do a lot, and it can, in the long term, beat the much smaller and group of anti-liberals whose views are very unpopular even amongst their own electorate. So I think, as I said, a double reckoning. First of all, the danger is great, and the achievements of our political rivals are great, and many people were not aware of that. But on the other hand, a sense of potency and pride and agency that we lacked for a very long time. So sort of pessimistic and optimistic at once, but I think this is where we are.
Yonatan, thank you for the honest combination of pessimism and optimism, this reality check. Avi, for your perspective with your multiple hats of where we're coming from and where we are. And Sally, thank you for the gift and the courage and the will to be here with imagination, to say that this really is a transformational moment for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, for Jews outside Israel who are looking at this moment, and many of us involved in really imagining what it could be like if the reckoning that Yonatan just mentioned really takes the next step. So what we'd like to end this part of this conversation with is a way we asked our American leaders before. If you were to take a snapshot, I was asked originally to talk about the next 75 years. Khalas, we can't even think about next week. So let's take the next year. A year from now, inshallah, halevai, we're here, we're active. What does Yeh Tov look like? What does better look like with all these efforts? One snapshot from your mouths to whoever ears a year from now. And Sally, why don't you start?
I actually think thinking 75 years from now is easier than thinking a year. I think in many ways, social movements and a change, deep radical change that happened historically within societies, the suffrage movement, they didn't know a year before that they would be able to win when they were incarcerated, when they were, beaten up by their husbands and by their fathers. And, they didn't know that they're going to win. And I think thinking always on the long run of the vision that you want to see is important, while also thinking the one step ahead. So maybe give me like a week, a month, and then like 75 years. But I think what I want to see is for the next year or couple of years, maybe next elections or the next couple of elections is really, there's no silver bullet. But I want to see the creation of a new kind of political protagonist, political hero, and political current that can encompass, the connection between social justice and connecting, Palestinian struggle to Mizrahi struggle to Ethiopian struggle, economic and social peripheries of Israel, and connecting that to ending the occupation, where the resistance to end the occupation is actually the patriotic thing to do for Israeli Jews. That's where I see it. And where, talking about, breaking, as I said before, the dichotomies of religious, secular, and Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, and periphery and center, and obviously the biggest one, Arab, Jewish, and really understanding how we can isolate the very, very small minority that have worked very, very hard to divide us, extremely hard, and they did a very good job. Really the bigger vision, you know, people always ask me, oh, what do you want? And they ask me to like draw on maps as a Palestinian. And I always say, I honestly don't care. I just want to live equally in liberty, in security, in my homeland as an equal, with security. And when we talk about security, it's really something that we really need to start reclaiming as a left, as a progressive camp. And because security is so much more than the monopoly they created over, you know, the homeland security, and really starting talking about what it means in the domestically in houses for women, for LGBTQ community, for the poor, housing, economic security. And these are all the things that are linked. And I think this is what I envision, just all of us living in the deepest sense of security and equality. It's a very simple vision, actually.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you. Avi, what's your vision?
Of course, I love Sally's vision, and I agree with that. So maybe I would stop in that if I wasn't a man. But I will say again, for me, it's a question about would this country of Jews, and of course of Arabs, but I see this very deep question. This country of Jews can live by its Jewish values of, again, justice and equality and so on. And of course, this is a conflict of decades in Judaism. You know, this beard, it's not about liking beards. I don't like beards. It's about Sfirat HaOmer. It's about Rabbi Akiva and his rabbinical student that he sent for their death in the war because he was fanatic. He has fanatic ideas, and he thought that God is with us, and then we can do anything. And it was like those days again. Those ideas, in so many ways, come to reality in this crazy country. But again, there are other values of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai and many other people, men and women. Of course, we tend in the past to forget our wonderful women. So I think about that, and I also want to dream about kind of, you know, it sounds, I just talked with a friend and he said, it sounds like Paris. So I said he was Ashkenazi from, you know, another status and so on. So I can talk about it. I can talk about the Middle East Union, kind of shared reality, because I really believe that if we want to flourish in a sustainable way for many, many years, we should also look on our peace in this world, you know, the Middle East, Africa and Asia and so on. And I want to start, of course, with my friends or my neighbors in Gaza. And it used to be like that. I was a child in Ashkelon when Gaza was our biggest city. And of course, my children doesn't understand that, because all the reality, it's been more than 22 years now from the first rocket in Sderot, and of course the reality in Gaza. So it's really nearby. It's 3 kilometers from here. So maybe we can start with that, kind of reestablish this union of Gaza and Sderot, and then reestablish the union of the Middle East. And I really hope and dream that my grandson will be visitors in Damascus, in Tripoli, where my family came from. And of course, it's a long way to do, but it's 75 years, so we can hope and dream.
Inshallah. Jonathan, will you give us a pessimistic, optimistic vision of the future?
A slightly more modest one, maybe. I would in a year, I would like to see the same energies that we see on the streets today sustained for the longer term, because we Israeli progressive liberals, whatever you want to call us, we are very good at these eruptive moments of civic awakening. We have already, experienced that in the past. 2011 was the last iteration of that phenomena, where it seemed like the world was going to change, and we are on the, we're about to experience a revolution, and everyone's awakened. And within 3 months, everything was back to normal, and even, things have gotten worse afterwards as a reaction to the protest movement. So I'm just giving that as one example, saying that we're very good demonstration organizers, really much better than the right. We excel at that, but we are much less competent at organizing for the longer term, at building the institutions needed for that, for gaining political power, at the tedious work of persuasion that is the bread and butter of politics, at pushing forward and advancing a new generation of leaders. We're very, very bad at that. So I would like to see all these amazing energies and enthusiasm, idealism, and anger channeled into long-term efforts, regardless of what happens to the judicial reform, because the anti-liberal project we are facing is not going to disappear once the reform is either passed or blocked, right? Whatever happens, they will keep on trying, keep on doing that, because that's their long-term project. They've been doing it for the last 15 years. So I would really like to see a liberal project, a long-term liberal project, challenging and beating that anti-liberal project. And if in a year we'll be able to see at least some of these energies sustained, then I'll know we're on the right track. But if we're back to normal, if liberals are back to their private lives, to their sweet melancholy, political melancholy, then I'd be very disappointed. So that's what I'd like to see in 1 year, a political camp slowly coming into being. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Avi, Jonathan, and Sally. We're going to wrap up in just a moment, and Noah and I were asked to share our vision of what's an optimistic hope, what's a reimagination. Sally, I want to take my cue from you talking about the suffrage movement. We just celebrated 100 years since that vote changed the world. I want to name the LGBTQ movement, where Stonewall just over 54 years ago. Who knew that there would be this? There'll be rainbow flags in the streets that are legitimate, and more Palestinian flags as well, as a way to understand that struggle takes time. But the energy, Jonathan, what you talked about, and the rabbinic history that Avi brings us, if those things can converge, then I would love us to be here next year with much more pride about the progress as the wrestling continues. I don't know. I have a dream that this time next year, there's another government in Israel, and that the energy that, Jonathan, as you mentioned, that is in the streets right now, all over the world, and online and in person, will grow to, as Sally said, reimagine the equal society that all of us deserve and that our great-grandchildren want to perpetuate. So I hope the energy continues and the conversations like these, online and in person, grow to include many, many more people who wrestle with truth and grow a better future.
Thank you, Amichai, and everyone. We're used to hear this growing, honest and critical voice of liberal Jewish communities, especially in the US, about Israel and Palestine. But this year, in this specific conversation, it sounds like many Israelis are also raising their voices louder and louder with the same ideas, but from within. It's not a progressive camp yet, I'm afraid, but it is maybe a liberal democratic camp, whatever that means now in Israel, which is growing and has more courage. So there's definitely a moment here that could lead maybe to a better Israel, in my view. And I can only hope that in 75 years, we will look back and at least feel that we did everything possible, that everything that we can to achieve that better future. So not as optimistic as the others maybe, but that's my realistic perspective. So thank you, everyone.
And thank you very much. I'm going to invite my dear colleague, Rabbi Maurice Harris of Reconstructing Judaism, to close this program out with me. Maurice?
It's a pleasure. I am Rabbi Maurice Harris with Reconstructing Judaism. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this fabulous conversation brought together by the Progressive Israel Network. Thank you especially to our speakers, Comptroller Brad Lander, Zach Harris, and Rabbi Andrea London, Yonatan Levy, Avi Dabush, and Sally Abed. Thank you to Zohorot and to the Jerusalem Youth Chorus for the use of their videos. And thank you especially to Noah Landau and Rabbi Amichai Lau Lavi.
Thanks, Maurice. I think one of the themes that's leaving me a little teary-eyed and with runny mascara, other than the beautiful music of David Broza and the song Yehi Tov written by Yonatan Geffen and the song by Jerusalem Youth Chorus, is the theme of Gam V'Gam that we heard echoed from all of our speakers today. Gam V'Gam, both and. I think we're understanding more and more the various levels of inextricably linked realities we live in. And today I'm really struck by the both and of celebrating as well as mourning, reckoning as well as embracing, both and, as my Rabbi Amichai always says, and to keep that going, that idea. Progressive Israel Network always promotes the joint Memorial Day ceremony that the Israeli-Palestinian Bereaved Families Forum and Combatants for Peace produce. This year is the 18th joint ceremony, and it promises to be very big on the ground in Israel. And we're all invited to join it remotely by Zoom on Monday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Jerusalem time. So look out for that event. That's another one that really does recognize our inherently linked realities and our inherently linked futures and pasts. So thank you again to all the speakers, to our fabulous hosts, and to all of you for tuning in today. What a meaningful hour and a half we've spent together, and see you next week.